with that. Okay, so good morning and welcome to the Employability Skill Series, where we explore the top skills employers are looking for in candidates. And each week we will cover different topics with thoughts and insights from professionals in a variety of industries. I am your host, Watson-Morrow, Associate Director for Career Services for our business careers. And today I have Mike Crawford, who is the Dean of Students, as my guest, and we will be discussing problem solving and critical thinking skills. Mike is in his 21st year here at FSC. He is actually a 1986 alum, and prior to returning back to FSC, he spent 20 years working with youth and young adults in the United Methodist Conference of Florida. He was also a concert promoter for 12 years and produced large-scale outdoor live music events throughout the Southeast. So good morning, Mike. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Well, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, Mike, before we get started?
Sure. My path to Florida Southern is an interesting one. Like you said, I spent a long time in the United Methodist Church in the state of Florida, working with youth and young adults. And at the end of my career in that portion, that season of my life, I was going into churches that had been had some sort of problem, whether the person in the church, the employee was absconded with money, or whether they'd been done sexually inappropriate things. But my job was to go in for a 1-year contract and basically clean house, get rid of everybody, and so that the next person that came in could pick up. And then I spent, like you said, a lot of time, 12 years promoting large-scale music events, outdoor music festivals. We'd have 150 bands on 15 stages, all for a whole weekend, those kinds of things. So lots of critical thinking, I guess, needed in that setting. But then I came here, the president of Florida Southern at the time, Tom Rusling, which was Dr. Kerr's predecessor, called me and said, we need you to come to Florida Southern. We have a job for you. So I was hired in another area and sort of was kind of pushed into this area, into student life, and became dean. Started out as assistant dean of students, where I was over all the programming, ACE, and student involvement and all that kind of stuff. And then became dean of students when my predecessor went to another role as well. So I've been here for you said I just started my 21st year here at Florida Southern, and under my umbrella, it's probably helpful to know that it's all of community living. So all the housing operations report up through me, the Simmons Center and all that they do in diversity work and multicultural students, international students, and then all of Center for Student Involvement, so fraternity life, sorority life, Association of Campus Entertainment, Student Government Association, leadership, civic engagement, also disability services reports up through me, and then student conduct. All of that is sort of, I manage all of those things.
So you don't do much, is what you're saying. Wow, so you've got a lot on your plate. So this is a great topic for us to talk about because it sounds like, because I hear a lot of, kind of some of the challenges, that you guys have faced and how you have to kind of circumvent those. So let's talk about what is really critical thinking and problem solving. What do these mean to you, and why are they important in the workplace?
So I think to me, I'll give, I don't know if this is a textbook definition or not, but I'll say for the definition of critical thinking, to me, is really taking all the information you have in that moment. And I have to stress that because, people always say, well, after I've made a decision, they'll say, well, if you knew now, if you knew then what you know now, would you have made a different decision? Many times, absolutely, because I have more information now, right? but it's taking all the information that you have in that moment about that particular situation. And sometimes you have the opportunity to sort of bounce ideas off people that you trust that have more experience in life than you, or more experience in that particular subject than you do. And then with all that information you have in that moment, again, I have to stress that you make the best decision that you can. And you hope that it's the right decision. And in that moment, it was the right decision. You have to have confidence that I made in this moment, knowing what I know now about this particular issue, I made the best decision I could. And you also have to realize that 5 minutes later, you might have information you didn't have earlier, and you would have changed the decision a little bit, or you may have even made a completely different decision. But you have to own that. So I would say that's part of it, and that's to me critical thinking is being able to take all of the knowledge that you've gained right over your lifetime, and in classrooms, in textbooks, in internships, all of those things. So all that information together, along with the information that you've gathered in the moment about that particular issue, and you make the best decision that you can in the moment. That to me, that's critical thinking, is the ability to do that. It's also problem solving, right? It's also saying, I always approach every problem as an opportunity, right? You know, it sounds cliche, but there is some sort of resolution to everything. It may not be an ideal resolution. It may not be the one that you would prefer, but there is a resolution. There is a resolution to that particular situation. And so if you approach something that way, to say, okay, I might not have all the information, but I need to, if I gather this person and this person and this person, or if I, gather these resources, I can get more information, and then I can solve a problem. And it may, like I said, it may be not an ideal solution, but again, it's the best solution you can come up with given what you're given. And that includes resources, because we live in a world right now that resources are more and more limited, right? Financial resources. We see budgets being cut. We see the economy changing. All of those kinds of things. And so ideally, we might like to have more money. If we could say we have this particular problem, and really the easiest thing is to throw more money at, right? We hire more people. We do this. We do that. But if that's not a possibility, then we go somewhere else. I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss, but I'm going to cuss on here because I want to share a quote with you. So Sheryl Sandberg, who's with Facebook for a long time, she wrote a great book called Option B. And one of the quotes that I like from her is, she says, option A is no longer a possibility. So let's kick the shit out of option B. So I think that's to me, I sort of think about that, right? Because you may not be able to control the ideal solution, but there is a solution.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this goes really hand in hand too with being adaptable, which is also like another great skill that we need to develop in the workplace and just in life in general. But things don't always happen the way that we plan them or want them to happen. I'm sure that you could probably talk and tell us stories for days about how you had your day planned and you came in to work, and then life had other plans and you had to adapt and figure out how you were going to work through it. I can tell you, like, when I used to be the director of education at a school for adjudicated youth called AMI Kids Polk. It was here in downtown Lakeland for a little while. And I had 3 teachers and an assistant. So there was 5 of us in our department. And at one point, literally one day, everybody quit. And I had to run a department of 5 all by myself. And that meant I had 3 classrooms of 45 students. And these were, again, adjudicated youth. So they were legally challenged, if you will, and behaviorally challenged. And so we had to get really creative and adapt, being able to problem solve. How are we going to continue to keep the school going with only 1 certified teacher, So that was really chaotic. But it taught me a lot, it definitely taught me a lot that things just don't always go the way that we plan. And sometimes we have to be quick on the fly to problem solve and think, okay, we can't just shut the doors. So what are we going to do? So I mean, I can definitely talk about how important it is, and I know that you probably could too. And I'm going to ask you, do you have an example that you could share with us about a time where maybe somebody on your team really like exemplified this, or maybe fell short and how it affected the team?
So I would go back to probably one of the most difficult situations that I've been in. Um, is I go back to COVID, right? So um, we didn't know what it was at first. We saw people getting sick and on campus and in the community in the world, all those kind of things. So we were told by uh, the county health department, the state health department, that we needed to shut down for a little bit. They said, oh, we need to stop operation for all schools at, we're gonna be back in 2 weeks. 2 weeks, it's all 2 weeks. So, but we need everybody to leave campus right away. And so we told students, go the next 2 weeks, just leave everything the where it is, in your rooms, and it's just going to be just go home and we'll figure this out. Well, then we all know that didn't happen. 2 weeks turned into a year, and so we had to make a decision about what we're going to do. So we had students that all left, and kid you not, I went into Lake Hollingsworth apartment, and I remember distinctly going into an apartment, and it was like the students had just left. There were still bowls of cereal with cereal in the bowl
Oh my
on
God.
the table.
Oh my
And so
gosh.
this is the way this everybody just took like their overnight bag or whatever they're going to take to go home. And so then we were told, well, really it's a lot worse than that. So we're going to be closing down. We're going to work. Everything's going to be remote. So my team went into every single apartment, every single residence hall, and packed everything up. That people just think about students that are participating. If you walked out tomorrow of your apartment or your residence hall, and you just took the stuff you thought you were going home for a couple of weeks, just took your clothes, your toothbrush, that kind of stuff, and you left everything else. And the way your apartment or your room is right now, in that moment, you left everything except for a duffel bag full of stuff. Then we went in and we packed everything up in every apartment, every room. Now we have about 2,400 beds on this campus, so that gives you an idea. Um, and so we went in and we labeled it the best we could, because you go to an apartment and you say, well, we know this is your stuff and this is your stuff because that's where your beds are and that kind of stuff. But you go into the kitchen, this is my pot, this is yours, So we just labeled everything in a box. We brought 2 men in that's the decision. I said, we can't do this ourselves. I hired 2 men in the truck. They brought in 6 teams and they started doing the same thing. And then we rented a big warehouse. We still have the warehouse, but it was floor to ceiling. If you can go and think about going into a huge warehouse that has these big racks, floor to ceiling, giant place with forklift, use it. We had, this particular area was LHA 101, and everybody's stuff was in boxes labeled. So we had to decide how we're going to. Then we had to catalog it. Because we wanted everybody to get their stuff back, so we did that. And Ramel Boyser, that's in the assistant dean of community living, was a rock star in that he came up with a system where he cataloged every bin was labeled and everybody, so they could get their stuff back to the right person. Then we had to decide institutionally who we were going to. Then we told we could bring 50% of the students back, because everybody had to have their own bedroom. So then we had to determine who we could bring back, who couldn't come back. Then we dealt with all of the difficulties of people who were angry, who were upset. My heart went out to everybody, because we had to make these decisions that were not popular, but were at the best interest of what we thought the information, again, we had in that moment were at the best interest for the students and for the institution. And there's just lots of decisions that were made we had no information because we'd never experienced, you couldn't look back in a textbook or look back, you couldn't Google something and say, what's historically, how's this been handled? What can we, there was no precedent. So we made it up. We collectively got together and put all the people on the team together, and we sat around the table and said, here's the problem. Here, how are we going to do the best we can with this terrible situation? It's a terrible situation. Everybody's feelings were hurt. Everybody was mad. Every time the phone rang, all I was doing was talking with people who were in tears or screaming at me, or I had, people telling me they were going to come after me and all kinds of things. But you just had to persevere, because the one thing that I will say, the thing that I learned a long time ago is whenever you have to make a decision that is possibly unpopular to someone, right? Or it's going to upset someone, you have to remember that they're not mad at you. They don't know you. They don't know, they haven't sat down with me and talked to me and know my life story and know they're upset or angry about that particular situation and about how it's impacting them. And so I try to approach things all the time, and I try to be empathetic about it. I try to say, well, this is impacting that person in this way, and I'm having to be the bearer of bad news. And what can I do to make that the least painful? And if they need to yell at me and they need to do those kind of things, then they need to do it, because they're not mad at me. They don't know me. They're not mad at me personally. They're upset about the situation.
I think that's really important for our students to hear that are on the call today. When people are lashing out, like you said, it's not personal. It feels personal. I mean, when you're being attacked and they're yelling at you and they're calling your name, and and there's saying you did this, but that takes a lot of emotional intelligence and maturity to sit back and say, it's not me that they're yelling at, they're just yelling at the situation. So I think that's really important. I'm glad that you made that point. Because students, you are going to encounter that, in just real life and your workforce and everything like that. So always try to assess it, think critically about the situation at hand. Did you do something? Are they, did you personally do something? Even when you can say that you didn't, you can kind of take the emotion out of it and then just kind of deal with the situation as it is when you take the emotion part out. I can't imagine what you guys had to go through. I was teaching in public school. I had just decided to leave and start my own business, which was remote right before COVID hit. So it didn't affect me per se, like my business. And I can't imagine, I just can't even wrap my brain around what you guys had to go through. But I did have to, my children were, of course, they were young at the time and they went, on spring break. And then of course the schools never reopened. And so then it was being, we had to think critically and we had a problem. Okay, so how are we going to continue education? How are we going to continue? So my little 5-year-old was on Zoom for the first time, trying to listen to the teacher. And what was really difficult, he was in speech therapy where you have to see mouths moving. And he's trying to have speech therapy over Zoom. And then when they did go back, they had to keep their masks on while he's trying to, fix his speech. So that was very interesting. But it's just be able to see the situation for what it is. So that's a really great story. And it sounds like you have a really great team. I mean, I know the team does not as well as you do, but to come together like that. And now I'm also thinking about the international students. I mean, how did they get home, with with all the testing requirements and the 2 weeks, because before they didn't have the rapid test. When this all started, it was like 2 weeks. How did that happen? How did they get home?
So with international students, it depended on the country. So some of the countries wouldn't let them back in, so they stayed here. So we did have people that we wouldn't put people out on the street. Right. But there are some students that when their countries wouldn't let them fly back out, there was all kinds of things. So we were as flexible as we could be with all of that situation, because we had the international students in general. Are sometimes depending on the countries there, we try to be as flexible as we can with them.
Yeah, but you're limited. You can only do what you can do, right. Especially when it's coming from down, coming from up above. It says you have to do these things. Yeah, that was a crazy time. Crazy time. Okay. So what kind of advice, could you give our students that are kind of learning to develop this skill and going to start implementing it? Like, what should they be on the lookout for, or what kind of things can they be doing now to make sure that they have these solid, good, nice employability skills when they go to graduate?
I think, I'm going to use the term that this word transferable skills. You all either you have already and you will continue to use critical thinking skills and decision making, right? It may not be something that you've learned that you haven't sat down in a class and say we're gonna talk about critical thinking this whole semester. Um, but if you think about your life experiences and you think about the jobs that you've had maybe through high school or the teams that you were on or the clubs that you were in, you all had to, you've employed those kinds of skills throughout, even in your family. And so I think that what I would suggest is that when you're facing a decision and you're having to use critical thinking skills, you don't think, oh, gosh, I'm going to have to use my critical thinking skills. But when you're trying to reach a decision, you call on those things on your own historical, the things that you've done in your life, right? The situations that you've been in and the knowledge that you've gained since then. So you think about, you do think about the things that you've learned in all the classes or your internships or jobs or all those things, and you use all of those things as you're making as you're thinking critically about situations, because there's no class or there's no number of classes you're going to take to prepare you for every situation. There's no way. It's not possible. It's not possible to say if this then this, if this then this, if this then this. It's just not possible because the unknown factor in all of our lives is the human factor, right? Because it doesn't matter what career path you have. On some level, you're going to be dealing with people, and people are not predictable because every person that you interact with has their own baggage and their own um, value system and their own all of those things that they bring with them. So there's nothing that can prepare you for the human factor. Even if you're doing a presentation to maybe you're at work and you've got your PowerPoint slides ready and you know what you're presenting, and all of a sudden this question comes out of left field from someone, and it sort of rocks your world, because they're human and they have something that you've presented has triggered their mind to go some other place that you haven't thought of, that you, even though you thought of all the questions that you could be asked, when you get ready to go into a job interview and you think you prepared all of these questions that they could ask, and someone says, what about this or this or this or whatever, that's automatically triggers. You think, okay, I got this. I know that I've got to have all these experience. You call on all this wisdom and this knowledge and these experiences and this learning that you have, and you can face it. And so I think that that you just have to know that the human factor is what kind of is going to be it will just continue to challenge us as we go through life, and whatever our position is, whatever your job you land, it doesn't matter your career choice. There are human beings involved on some level.
Yes.
Even if you're an actuary, right, and you're in the room and you're doing the actuary, the work that you're doing, you're still, you have a boss, you have coworkers, you have, all those things. So
That's a great point. Yeah. Because it's funny, you must have been reading my mind. So that's exactly the human factor was rolling around in my head as you were talking right before you said it. So that's awesome. Yeah, I think the two big things that we could maybe take away from this is when you're faced with a problem or a situation that requires you to kind of think critically or to, kind of have to problem solve, take all the information and make sure that you have it all, not just like seeing just the one piece. You can't see the full elephant if you're only, touching the leg. You don't know what it is. You have to see the entire situation for what it is. Take all the information in objectively. So take emotion out, especially if, you know, like you're being kind of attacked verbally, if you will, but take the emotion out and then just take all the information in and maybe remove yourself from the situation. I like to think sometimes if I'm in the middle of something, and I take myself out and I say, if my friend was, you know, looking in, what would they say? Or if this was happening to my friend, what would I say to my friend? And that helps me kind of make a decision by taking that emotion piece out where I'm so connected. So if you find yourself kind of in that situation where you don't really know what to do, just take a step back, get all the information and take the emotion out and then see if you can come up with a clear plan. I think is a good takeaway from this.
I agree.
We're kind of coming to a close. Mike, I want to thank you so much again for joining us. And do you have any last kind of closing remarks for our students?
I would say this, you're going to make the wrong decision at some point. You really are. I'll be 60 in October, and I've made a lot of decisions that I look back on and said, well, if I would have known, always that, that proverbial, if I would have known then what I know now about this particular thing, then I would have made a different decision. But one thing that I would take away is don't beat yourself up. You made the best decision. Again, I go back to with the information you had in that moment, you made the best decision you knew how. And so, if it's the wrong decision, then just own it. Just say that, I did the best I could do. And so I think don't go in and think, oh gosh, I wish I would have done this different. I wish I would have done this different. Well, we all do. We all there are many things we wish we would have done different. But in the moment, this is what we did, and just own it and then learn from that and move on.
Yeah, that's big too. Owning it, embracing it. Don't make excuses. Just own it. All right. And then learn. All right. Well, thank you again, Mike. And thank you everyone who joined us. Again, if you want your attendance counted, please make sure that you scan the QR code on the screen or click the link in the chat pod. I'll go ahead and just throw it in there real quick one last time. See if you have it. And thank you everybody for joining. Thanks again, Mike.
Bye-bye.
Bye.